Welcome to Retire Japan Chat, where we talk about more personal, kind of subjective topics. And we haven't done one of these for a while, but I took a trip to Europe this month and I did a lot of thinking on that trip. And here are 10 things that I've been thinking about. Now, this trip to Europe has been 4 years in the making. It's been 4 years since I've seen my family and friends back in Europe, and for the last year or so I've been trying to make this trip work, using air miles to book my tickets, and it's been really difficult because there are fewer flights, the flights are more expensive, and the airlines are not really releasing tickets as much. There's huge demand for a smaller number of seats. It's been quite tough to put this trip together. Finally, I managed it with a bit of air mile kind of finagling. And I managed to make it back to Spain to see my uncle and aunt, and to London to see some friends, and to Germany to see my godfather. And that trip was great. I took 3 weeks, took it fairly slowly. It was quite chilled, but I did a lot of thinking on the trip. And the first big thing that happened was when I came back for maybe the first time ever, I felt really happy returning to Japan. In the past, every time I landed at Narita, I kind of tense up and had this feeling of kind of oppressiveness descend. I mean, I like living in Japan, but there is that certain kind of tension. And this time I didn't have that. So I thought that was a really good sign in terms of my life here in Japan. Second big thing that I took away from this trip is that I don't think Brexit is going to be reversed anytime soon. So I had been hoping that maybe the UK would rejoin the common market in a reasonable time frame. I think rejoining the EU is going to be incredibly difficult. But I thought maybe rejoining the common market might be an option. And of course, being in the common market would give us freedom of movement back. So I thought that was quite a reasonable kind of hope for the future. But I've talked to a few people and really thought about it a bit more. I don't think it's going to happen within the next 10 years, say. It probably will happen in the future, but not within 10 years, which leads me to point 3, which is that I think I'm going to naturalize in Japan. And this is something else I've been thinking about for a long time. I actually got all the paperwork together and went in for an interview back in 2011. So just before the 3/11 earthquake, I went into the Homukyoku here in Sendai, which is the kind of, what is it, like the law ministry kind of thing, the interior ministry maybe, and had my interview to naturalize. And then shortly afterwards, of course, we had 3/11, we had the earthquake and nuclear accident, and we ran away from Sendai, went to Kanazawa for a month, came back, and then that whole naturalizing thing kind of dropped off by the wayside. But I have been thinking about it ever since, and the thing that was stopping me was that I really do feel European, and I like the idea of being able to live and work in Europe freely. But of course, since Brexit, I haven't had that right, and I don't think I'll ever go back to the UK. And I do feel comfortable and at home here. My family's here, my work's here, my home is here. Visiting Spain and the UK and Germany really brought it home to me that I wouldn't want to live elsewhere. I want to live in Japan. And so for me, at least, naturalizing is kind of the natural next step. So I'm going to be trying to tie up some loose ends, and then I'll probably be going through with that, hopefully before my passport expires in 2027. So within the next 3 or 4 years, hopefully I'll be making steps in that direction. On the other hand, I did notice that in Europe, I'm much more relaxed. I'm much more easygoing. I'm more friendly in a way than I am here in Japan. So, I mean, partly that's because I was on holiday and I was very unstressed and also I was kind of a tourist in that situation in a strange way. I was visiting, so I didn't mind certain things in a way that they do bother me in Japan. So that's something else I'm going to try and work on. I'm going to try and become that more relaxed, more chilled, more friendly person here in Japan. And a lot of that is basically letting go of the past. So there's lots of little things that kind of irritate me, but they irritate me because of my past, not so much because of the thing itself. So I need to just let go of that. and just try and be more relaxed, I think, while I'm living here. That's something for me to work on in the future. In more practical terms, visiting Europe really brought home how expensive countries outside of Japan have been getting. And that's another reason why I think we'll probably stay here. For us to move to Germany, to move to the UK, we'd be taking a huge quality of life hit in terms of the kind of money that we'd have to spend to maintain our current lifestyle in Europe. And I think that's increasingly going to be a factor going forward. So since I've been here in Japan 23 years now. When I came, Japan felt expensive compared to the UK. But since then, prices in Japan haven't changed. Prices in the UK have like doubled or tripled. And it's really, really jarring now to travel abroad and see how much things cost. Things that I take for granted in Japan, like very cheap restaurants of really good quality. My housing situation's incredibly cheap here in Japan. And basically just the type of life you can have here on a certain income is much better, I think, than the life that you'd be able to have in many countries on that same income level. For my trip, maybe for the first time, I took out proper travel insurance. So in the past, when I've traveled, I've kind of assumed that either I would be okay or that my credit cards kind of travel insurance would cover me. And this time I said, no, it's actually worth paying the premium just to have proper cover for the trip. And I did some investigation. I asked on the RetireJapan forum, and I took out a product. And if you're interested, I'll put a link in the description to that travel insurance. And it was reasonably priced, and I didn't need it, of course, but it was there if I did. And I think when traveling, it's one of those things where you pay a small amount of money to avoid a potential disastrously large amount of money, which is what we're talking about when we're talking about accidents or health issues abroad. On the trip, I reread Die with Zero, which is a book by Bill Perkins, I think his name is, and he wrote this book, and the book is basically one concept, and the concept is that we should think about our spending, not just in terms of financial terms, but also in terms of where we are in life and health, and in terms of building up a kind of experience investment that pays dividends into the future. And I think it's an incredibly powerful concept, and it's very, very useful for people who are good with personal finance. So most people are not good with personal finance, or they haven't got to that stage yet. They haven't learnt enough yet. But for those of us that have, we have a high savings rate, and we're investing for the future, and we're frugal, and we really think about our spending carefully, and we think about the future. There's a danger there that you get too entrenched in those habits, and you end up not actually spending that money and missing out on experiences and so on that you could have had if you'd have a slightly different money mindset. And for me at this point, trying to flip those habits maybe and spend a bit more is an important thing for me to be working on. So if you're in a similar situation, I really recommend the book. It's not a great book, but the concept's really, really useful, I think. So definitely check that out. I'll stick a link in the description to that as well. And of course, while I was on my trip, I was planning to do a bunch of work and study for the financial planner test, which is tomorrow, or probably by the time you see this video, it will be over. And of course, I did not. So I think, at least for me, being like a digital nomad and like traveling around with a laptop and working in various places, it's just a non-starter. I need to be at home in my routine for me to get useful work done, I think. And so, of course, for the rest of the day, I'll be cramming for that test tomorrow. Wish me luck. I'll probably do a video about the financial planner qualifications and how the test went and so on. So I'll see you in that video.